of
Hello and welcome. I'm Suma Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. The U.S. Justice Department releases 3 million pages, 180,000 images, and 2,000 videos linked to Jeffrey Epstein. The release comes after a missed legal deadline, with officials saying it ends a major review to ensure transparency. The U.S. government enters a partial shutdown after Congress fails to pass a 2026 budget. Lawmakers signal a quick fix as the White House moves to ratify a Senate-backed deal next week. According to a statement by the Danish Foreign Ministry, Denmark will reopen its embassy in Damascus after a 14-year closure, with Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen saying embassy will resume operations to better monitor developments and boost cooperation with Syria. The U.S. Chief of Mission for Venezuela is set to arrive in Caracas as the government proposes a broad amnesty law. Acting President Delcy Rodriguez says the bill could free hundreds of political detainees and transform a notorious prison. Iran says it is ready for fair and equitable talks with the United States as regional tensions continue to rise. President Donald Trump refuses to rule out military action, while Tehran says negotiations cannot occur under threats. Washington approves $6.67 billion in arms sales to Israel amid a fragile Gaza ceasefire. The package includes 30 Apache attack helicopters and infantry assault vehicles, according to the State Department. According to local officials, at least 200 people were killed after heavy rains triggered devastating landslides at a mine in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, which is controlled by M23 rebels, while authorities warned the toll could rise as rescue operations continue. According to international media reports, Guinea-Bissau opposition leader Domingos Simoes Pereira was released from jail on Friday after months in detention following the November military coup that ousted President Umaro Sissoco Embalo just days after presidential elections. Now for this hour, we start with U.S. Newly released Department of Justice documents show Howard Lutnick, currently serving as Trump's Commerce Secretary, arranged to visit Jeffrey Epstein's private island in 2012. Emails indicate Lutnick and his family, including his wife and children, were planning a holiday trip to the Caribbean and coordinated with Epstein's assistant to potentially meet him. Documents suggest a meeting took place with Epstein following up on December 24th via email. Additionally, the files show Lutnick invited Epstein to a fundraiser for Hillary Clinton in 2015. Although it is unclear whether Epstein actually attended previously, Lutnick described an earlier encounter with Epstein in 2005 as uncomfortable, saying he immediately decided to cut off contact and never be in Epstein's presence again. Neither Lutnick nor the Commerce Department have commented on the newly released documents. Now we welcome Mr. Keith Vaz. He's a former British minister, joins us live from Dubai. Thank you very much, Mr. Vaz, for joining us. Good to see you again. Now looking at this, what are we to make of latest connections once again coming in between the political elites of U.S., especially of U.S. and Jeffrey Epstein?
Good afternoon, Asuma from Dubai. Well, most of these names were mentioned before, so this is not new. The fact that the elite of Washington and the United States were good friends with Jeffrey Epstein. However, I think people will be wanting to look at the actual videos, because we've seen the names, we've seen the references before, but what we have not seen is any kind of a relationship in the sense of the videos of Epstein, the photographs of Epstein, but we've actually seen mentions of these names before. Bill Clinton and others have been in there. Elon Musk is a surprise for me, but there is no question that people are going to want to look at these videos. It's 3 million files, which is quite a lot. And there is no question that people are going to be fascinated by this.
Right. As you know, the latest reports have come out. Some victims have voiced their opinion, saying that, or criticizing, saying that these releases have not protected them, but protected the perpetrators. What's your take on that?
Well, we don't know because I've not seen any of the evidence and the files. People are going through these very carefully. So this is not the first time this is being done. So from our point of view, I think what we'll need to do is have a look at the evidence, look at it very carefully, and then come to a conclusion. As it currently stands, we don't know the answer to this until you go through the documents. But it is still a shock that so many of these files, photographs, recordings are now making their way. And this is not the end, of course, Asuma. There are many, many more to come, and people want to see all of those.
Yes, and what steps should Justice Department take to balance transparency with victim protection?
Well, it's difficult to know until we have the whole gamut of files. That, as I said, there are millions out there, and what is essential is that we look at it and see if there's any wrongdoing. We know that people have suffered politically because of the fact that they were involved. The Duke of York, the brother of the King of England, etc. They've had a lot of problems with dealing with this matter. Former British ambassador to Washington. In the past, the mere mention of their name in connection with Epstein has been enough to change the whole dynamics around them. So from that point of view, there are issues that need to be looked into very carefully. I'm afraid I'm not the best person to do that. That's for prosecutors rather than us.
Yes, and now, you know, as Attorney General Pam Bondi prepares to testify before Congress in U.S., so what accountability measures can lawmakers realistically demand to ensure justice for survivors and also prevent future mishandling of such cases?
Well, the parliamentarians themselves don't have the opportunity of doing this because the parliamentarians don't have, the congressional leaders, not the parliamentarians, they don't have the ability to make these choices and these decisions. This is something that can only be done by the prosecutors. And whether or not, I'm not sure whether Donald Trump would want to appoint a special prosecutor because he's one of the people who's mentioned. And the last thing he'd want to do is go the same way as previous presidents. You appoint a special prosecutor and then you end up being prosecuted. So I think the only person who can do that now is the Attorney General and the head of the Justice Department, and she is an appointee, very partisan appointee by the president. So I can't see her deciding to appoint a prosecutor.
With that, I'd like to thank Mr. Vaz for joining us and sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you. Now, moving on to Middle East, on Saturday today, Israel carried out its heaviest airstrikes on Gaza in weeks, killing 26 people, according to local health authorities. These strikes targeted a Hamas-run police station, as well as apartments and tents in an area sheltering displaced Palestinians. Video footage captured the moment an airstrike hit Gaza City, with the Israeli military issuing a warning of the incoming attack. The strikes were a response to an incident on Friday when Israeli troops allegedly identified 8 gunmen emerging from a tunnel in Rafah, a region in southern Gaza. 3 gunmen were killed and a fourth, described as a key Hamas commander, was also detained. The Israeli military considers this as a violation of the October ceasefire agreement, but Hamas blamed Israel for breaching the truce. Now, for this discussion, we welcome back Mr. Keith Vaz. He's joining us live from Dubai. Thank you very much, Mr. Vaz, for staying with us. Now, according to this, 8 gunmen were identified, but the death toll is 26. So even if we consider all 8 gunmen to be Hamas, what about the remaining 18? Are these like, what about them? How will Israel justify killings of all of them?
Well, we need to ask the Israelis that rather than me. I want a ceasefire. I think the whole world wants a ceasefire. This attack on these posts makes nonsense of what President Trump is trying to do, which is to get a border peace together. So I don't know the facts of this, but it's certainly, as you have said, Asuma, the figures don't add up. If there were 8 gunmen, what happened to the other 18? Who were the other 18? And that is what the Israeli government will need to justify when people ask them this question. And I hope that you all will put this to them, because they're the best people to give you an answer.
Right. Thank you for saying that. And now, how realistic is the implementation of phase 2 of the peace deal? As you know, the push goes on, but the situation in ground seems different.
Well, not very good, I'm afraid. It is not a question that people would feel that they're comfortable with. The ceasefire has not happened. There was a great drama with the signing of the peace deal, and it's carrying on. And as you said in your earlier bulletin, the Americans have just voted another $6.5 billion to the Israeli government,
yes,
including Apache forces. So it's going on, and it makes the nonsense of people saying that there is peace out there. There is no peace at the moment. There is only more and more war.
Yes, indeed. And you know, as the ceasefire, even this is fragile, the ceasefire brokered by many U.S. in many places across the world, most of them, it seems like all of them are, or most of them seem to be very fragile. Do you think there's a difference or disinformation of what U.S. understands or what U.S. knows, which is happening on the ground, versus what's on the table, what's on the papers to be signed?
No, I think they know absolutely what's going on. There is no difference between the knowledge of the Israelis and the knowledge of the Americans. They all know exactly what's going on. And therefore, I'm surprised that people still say there is a peace process going on. There doesn't appear to be a peace process going on. There is a lot of killing and war going on, and someone needs to sort this out. It's obviously not going to be Donald Trump, because he is very close to the Israelis. It has to be somebody else.
And lastly, you know, is the push for international peacekeepers from President Trump goes on. So why do you think why Israel is opposing Turkey and Qatar joining these forces?
Again, Asuma, you need to ask Mr. Netanyahu. I think it would be in everyone's interests for all countries to be there. I don't think anyone sends a peacekeeper in order to propagate war. And for them to actually lend these troops is a big decision. And I hope they will be allowed to do so.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Keith Vass for always joining us and sharing that insight with us on NewsX World. Now we move on to Iran. As per reports, we are now learning about the tragic gas explosion at a residential building in Iran's Khuzestan province, where at least 4 people have been confirmed dead. The explosion caused by a gas leak occurred in a 4-unit building in the provincial capital, or Ahvaz. Firefighters and rescue teams have been deployed to the scene, carefully removing debris to search for any other potentially trapped individuals. The incident is under investigation. Now we stay in Iran. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian has blamed U.S. President Donald Trump, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and European leaders for fueling the recent unrest in Iran. President Pezeshkian has accused foreign powers of exploiting Iran's economic struggles and encouraging protests. He has said that they sought to create division, instigate violence, and tear the nation apart. The president has emphasized that protests are legitimate, but violence and destruction, like attacks on military forces and the burning of ambulances and bazaars, are not acceptable. He has added that Iran is willing to listen to its people and address their concerns, but foreign interference only worsens the situation. Let's listen in.
چه نتانیاهو چه اروپایی‌ها همه به دنبال این بودن که تحریک بکنن، تفرقه ایجاد بکنن و تجهیز کردن و یه عده مردم بیگناه رو با این جریان همراه کردن و ریختن تو خیابونا و تهییج میکردن که باید این مملکت رو همان گونه فرمودن تیکه تیکه کنن، دعوا و نفرت بین مردم ایجاد کنن، تفرقه درست کنن. در هیچ اعتراض معمولی اجتماعی تفنگ به دست نمیگیرن و آماده ایم گوش بدیم، آماده ایم با اونا، وظیفمونه با اونا بشینیم و مشکلات رو حل کنیم. اما همه میدونن مسئله فقط اعتراض اجتماعی نبود، سوار بر مشکلات ما شدن، تحریک کردن و به دنبال این بودن و به دنبال این هستن که جامعه رو شقه شقه کنن و حضور رهبری و وجود نازنین ایشون و نگاه‌هایی که وجود داره این توطئه ها رو همیشه خنثی کرده و خنثی خواهد کرد.
Now we welcome Ambassador Baswati Mukherjee. She's a former Indian ambassador, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now looking at this, Iran seems to be blaming other nations like US and Israel instead of blaming themselves or taking responsibility for this protests that took place. So how is this benefiting this government while blaming outsiders?
Well, in the first instance, the government of Iran should understand that if it was a real democracy, they should listen to the voice of the people who are protesting against price rise, inflation, water crisis, and a host of other issues connected with development, quite apart from issues that the women face with regard to the violation of their human rights. But there is also no doubt that the Americans particularly have tried to meddle in these demonstrations and have tried to put pressure on the Iranian government not to crack down too sharply. They have succeeded to a certain extent by being able to stop some scheduled executions, which is of great relief. But if a foreign power beyond a point, for instance, moves a huge armada and says to the Iranian government that you better negotiate, otherwise it's going to be very tough for you. Most countries that have been under colonial rule, and that includes India, are extremely sensitive to perceptions of foreign intervention and pressure. Actually, such kinds of open and overt foreign intervention, in my perspective, makes a bad situation worse. To a certain extent, it is successful that the crackdown has decreased, the executions have not taken place, the demonstrations are much more subdued, and what would be ideal would be if the Iranian government could open up a dialogue and interaction with those who are demonstrating and work out via media which is good for the people of Iran, etc. It would appear to me that Iran's rulers are out of touch with their people, and they think that violent crackdowns on democratic protests is one way of keeping the pressure down. It never works. It's like a pressure cooker. The more it boils inside and you hold the lid down, it's bound to explode. That is what the Iranians should work out on their own. But on the other hand, the kind of overt pressure that President Trump is bringing on the Iranian regime, I fear may result in an open conflict. It could result in the Straits of Hormuz getting closed, which would affect global oil prices and global supplies. And it could actually have very dangerous consequences for international peace and security. So I'm trying to put it in a perspective that beyond a point, this kind of pressure, which has got nothing to do with the demonstrations, because he wants Iran Trump wants Iran to give up its nuclear weapons program, etc., etc. But that is not the way to bring Iran to the bargaining table. He should go through the UN and start an UN process to negotiate with Iran, as indeed his predecessors did. And there was a process, and there was an agreement, which actually the Americans walked out of. So I am actually very concerned at the evolving situation in Iran, and it has implications for India, serious implications for India, not to mention the more than 30,000 Indian citizens who are in Iran as students or doing business, etc. I presume our embassy must have requested them to leave Iran as soon as possible, because in case of conflict, they would get stuck there and would have no other option but to leave either through Turkey or through Afghanistan, neither of which are very attractive prospects. So it's a very difficult situation out there.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. And how do you analyze the openness of US and both Iran's in terms of diplomacy? Do you think they have shut that door, or do you think it's still open? If so, then how?
The present American administration under President Trump doesn't believe in diplomacy at all. Their philosophy is old-fashioned imperialism. You have to put pressure and squeeze the weaker states. That is not how diplomacy works. As a diplomat with 40 years in the Foreign Service, I have seen very difficult negotiations, for instance, between the Palestinians and the Israelis many years ago. First, they would be kept in two separate rooms. A negotiator would find a common ground. Then they would come and sit together, etc. There are many ways. The UN knows how to handle all this. The problem is that President Trump has no faith in the UN, has no faith in multilateralism, and he thinks that only by using open military or economic pressure can he bring a weaker state down to its knees. That is actually very detrimental, as I said, to a process of a negotiated settlement. Because most countries would be hesitant to do that, because their own people would abandon them if they think that they have been cowed down by brute force of this kind, a kind of tactic which I thought had gone away with the end of colonialism and imperialism. It has come right back. I call it neo-colonialism and neo-imperialism. Neo-colonialism with regard to Venezuela, and neo-imperialism with regard to other countries. I don't think you can call it diplomacy as Suma. This is not a definition of diplomacy. This is not how diplomats define diplomacy. And I don't think that he has too many professional diplomats in his team. They are mainly hardcore, transactional business people who are bringing into diplomacy what they do on a daily basis in business. They strike hard deals, they do a hostile takeover, etc. You can do a hostile takeover in business. You can't take hostile takeover of a country which is a sovereign member of the United Nations with the same rights technically that a more powerful country has.
And Ambassador, lastly, Iran has said that it would have been open to the talks only if it was, it had no preconditions or, like stopping them from their nuclear, as they claim that it's a peaceful nuclear, for the civilian use, right? So why is Iran so confident or emboldened about seeing eye to eye with US?
The Iranian program was under IAEA safeguards, which is the procedure, normal procedure when you're using nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. Because it's clean energy, although Trump doesn't believe in climate change, and it's supposed to be a substitute for fossil fuels, which are hastening climate change. The Iranians cannot agree to preconditions because what Trump is demanding would be the outcome of a negotiation. In other words, if Trump wants Iran to give up its nuclear program, he has to start a negotiated settlement by which at the end of the deal would be that in return for this and this, Iran would give up its nuclear weapon program. That comes at the end of a negotiation. It doesn't come in the beginning of a negotiation. Then there is no negotiation. That's what I'm trying to tell you. You have merely coerced your weaker opponent into a deal. And Iran will not see eye to eye on it. And Iran has already told its neighbors who host American bases that if America attacks Iran from those bases, Iran will attack those countries. Those countries have told the Americans they will not allow the bases on their territory to be used to attack Iran. Why? Because they don't want to get involved in this. And I think if President Trump would take a close look at the geography of the region and the Straits of Hormuz, what on earth would happen to global oil supply if the Iranians, for instance, decide to sink a ship in the middle of the Straits of Hormuz? It would take a couple of months to get it cleared. What would happen to global oil supplies? What would happen to Qatar's oil? It's a very serious situation.
Yes.
He needs to take a geography lesson.
Yes.
To see exactly how critical the situation is if he pushes this too far.
100%.
Up to a certain extent, pressure is all right. But when it becomes coercion, it doesn't work with most sovereign countries. It certainly, if you look at Iran's history through millennia, it's a millennia-old civilization like India.
Yes.
This kind of pressure will never work on Iran. That's what I'm saying.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for sharing that insight with us on NewsX World. Now we move on to DRC. A mine collapse in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo has killed more than 200 people. The disaster occurred on Wednesday at the Rubaya Coltan mine, which has been controlled by the M23 rebel group since 2024. Rubaya produces about 15% of the world's coltan, a key metal used in mobile phones, computers, aerospace components, and gas turbines. Victims include minors, children, and market women, while dozens were rescued with serious injuries. An advisor to the governor confirmed at least 227 deaths, though the toll may rise. Meanwhile, a witness has responded. Let's listen into what the witness has shared.
Njoo mvuli ilinyesha, ikisha meza onyesha. Njoo mporomoko sasa ikitoka ikipiga watu wote wakikufa. Wamoja walikuwa katika chini ya shimo, wamoja walitoka, wengine wakabikia ndani, basha kufa. Wengi wangali ndani, wangali mule ndani. Hawajatoka, wangali tu mule.
Now moving on to South America, Venezuela's National Assembly has approved a sweeping reform of the country's main oil law, aimed at reviving the crippled energy sector and drawing foreign investment. The reforms, backed by interim President Delcy Rodriguez, lower taxes, expand the oil ministry's powers, and give private producers more autonomy, including the ability to manage assets, outsource operations, and commercialize output independently from state company PDVSA. This move marks a major shift after 2 decades of strict nationalization and follows a $100 billion U.S.-backed plan to rebuild the industry after former President Nicolas Maduro was captured by U.S. The Trump administration has eased sanctions on Venezuelan oil, signaling support for foreign investment. While many industry experts view the law as enough to encourage initial investment, critics warn that the fast-tracked reform may lack transparency and raise corruption risks, particularly given prior secret deals with energy firms under Maduro. Let's listen into what the people of Venezuela has shared.
Bueno, nos puede beneficiar primeramente porque es una empresa que puede crear nuevos empleos, le van a dar oportunidades a las personas que están estudiando y a los que están buscando experiencia.
Mira, no sé, yo creo que sí, que con esta nueva ley de hidrocarburos puede beneficiar mucho al país, ¿sabes? Y en lo que es ingresos y crear nuevas fuentes de empleo para el país, que eso es lo que bastante nos hace falta a todos.
Puede beneficiar a una parte, pero lo que están mandando a nosotros a pie nunca. No me llamaron y me dijeron sí para ir a votar. Votaron fueron ellos nada más para esa ley, pues. ¿Me entiendes? Es algo que ya en el país debería existir desde hace tiempo esa ley, pero existiera la que se la llevaba, más nada.
That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.